Lisa and Hunted Spirits. Once upon a chilling night, in a remote and eerie countryside inn, nestled deep within the thick woods, there lived a night manager named Lisa. The inn had a sinister reputation, as it was said to be haunted by spirits of long-dead travelers. Most guests avoided the place, but a few daring souls sought the thrill of spending a night within its creaking walls. One stormy evening, a group of adventurous travelers arrived at the inn, seeking refuge from the relentless downpour. Lisa greeted them with a warm smile, trying to hide her own unease about the place. They were a diverse group, a historian named Professor Whitman, a couple on their honeymoon, a reclusive writer, and a jovial musician named Isaac. The night was darker than most, as the storm had knocked out the power lines, leaving the inn shrouded in an eerie blackness. Lisa, however, was determined to make their stay memorable, despite the ominous surroundings. She lit candles in the dining room and prepared a feast fit for kings, serving it by the flickering candlelight. As the guests indulged in the sumptuous meal, Lisa regaled them with stories of the inn's disturbing history. The wind howled outside, and the rain tapped persistently on the windows, like skeletal fingers trying to gain entry. The historian, Professor Whitman, listened with keen interest, recording every detail of Lasa's tales. The writer sat silently in the corner, scribbling down notes, while the newlyweds clung to each other, feeling a growing sense of unease. Isaac, the musician, decided to break the tension by picking up his guitar. He strummed haunting melodies that echoed through the empty hallways. His voice, sweet and sorrowful, sang of lost souls and cursed places. The music seemed to connect with something otherworldly, as the atmosphere in the inn grew thicker and more foreboding. Hours passed, and Lisa served drinks to the guests as they huddled together, their nerves on edge. The power remained out, plunging the inn into complete darkness, save for the candlelight that cast eerie shadows on the walls. The stories Lisa told became increasingly unsettling, and the guests couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched by unseen eyes. Just as the clock struck midnight, a chilling wind swept through the inn, extinguishing the candles. Darkness enveloped them like a shroud, and silence descended. Panic set in as they fumbled for flashlights and candles, but the inky blackness was relentless. Then, a haunting voice echoed through the inn, a voice not belonging to any of them. It whispered ancient words that sent shivers down their spines. The guests clung to each other in terror, their hearts pounding as the voice grew louder and more malevolent. But in the midst of the horror, Lisa stepped forward, her voice steady and strong. She began to sing a hauntingly beautiful song, her voice cutting through the darkness like a beacon of hope. The guests, drawn to her song, joined in, their voices melding in an ethereal harmony. As they sang, the darkness began to recede, and the malevolent voice faded into nothingness. The candles reignited, and the inn returned to an eerie but manageable state of quiet. With the night finally over, the guests departed at first light, leaving the inn behind with a mixture of relief and wonder. They couldn't explain what had transpired that night, but they were grateful to Lisa, the night manager, with a hauntingly beautiful voice, who had entertained them and protected them from the malevolent spirits that dwelled within the inn's walls. And so the inn's reputation persisted, but those who had been there that fateful night would never forget the night manager, who had turned a night of horror into a night of hauntingly beautiful music and survival. The Midnight Shift. It was a moonless night at the old Riverside Inn, a decrepit hotel nestled on the outskirts of a forgotten town. Inside, the dimly lit lobby exuded an eerie silence, only punctuated by the soft ticking of the antique grandfather clock. The lone night manager, Daniel, begrudgingly prepared to serve food to the few remaining guests scattered throughout the hotel's rooms. As Daniel made his way to the kitchen, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. It wasn't an unfamiliar sensation in the Riverside Inn, where rumors of hauntings and strange occurrences had circulated for decades. Daniel dismissed the unease as a product of his overactive imagination, though. In the kitchen, he plated the guests' orders, a chicken Alfredo pasta, and a grilled cheese sandwich. The clinking of plates and cutlery filled the air as he worked, amplifying the oppressive silence of the night. With the trays balanced carefully, he ventured into the dimly lit hallway, the floorboards creaking beneath his hesitant footsteps. The first room he approached was 217. As he knocked gently and announced himself, there was only silence on the other side. Daniel opened the door cautiously, revealing a dimly lit room with a single flickering candle on the nightstand. The bed was immaculately made, but there was no sign of the guest. The aroma of food hung heavily in the room. Daniel's heart quickened as he left the tray on the dresser, convinced that he had seen a shadow moving in the corner of the room. He tried to shake off the feeling and hurriedly left the room, making his way to 311, his next destination. Upon knocking at the door of 311, Daniel received no response once again. He couldn't help but notice the unnatural cold seeping out from under the door. He cautiously turned the knob and found himself in a room plunged into darkness, save for the eerie glow of the full moon spilling through the window. As he entered the room, he felt a chill run down his spine, but his flashlight flickered and died, leaving him in the pitch-black darkness. He fumbled for his phone to use its light and saw the tray he had set on the table, but the guest's chair was tipped over and the plate was shattered on the floor. He could hear faint whispers, and as he scanned the room, he caught a glimpse of a shadowy figure standing in the corner. Terrified, Daniel rushed out of the room and made his way back to the lobby, his heart pounding. He couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister lurked in the Riverside Inn. He decided to call the police, explaining the bizarre occurrences he had encountered. They promised to send an officer over to investigate. As he waited, he ventured back to the kitchen, determined to stay there until the police arrived. But as he approached the kitchen door, he heard a whisper from behind him, so close that he could feel hot breath on his neck. He slowly turned, his flashlight revealing a horrifying sight: a gaunt, ghostly figure with hollow eyes and outstretched arms. Before Daniel could react, the figure lunged at him, and everything went black. The next morning, the police arrived to find the Riverside Inn empty, except for the chilling remnants of a night manager's terrifying encounter. Daniel was never seen again, and the Riverside Inn remained a place of whispered legends and ghostly tales, a place where the night manager's shift was a horror story that would be passed down through generations. Jane and Finger Shadow. In the heart of rural Pennsylvania, nestled among the dense woods and rolling hills, stood the Oakwood Inn. This old hotel was a relic of the past, a place where the whispers of history seemed to linger in the creaking floorboards and the flickering candles that adorned its dimly lit corridors. It was a place known for its eerie charm, and some would say, its unsettling history. On a cold and stormy October night, the Oakwood Inn was nearly deserted. The heavy rain beat relentlessly against the windows, and the wind howled through the trees, creating an eerie symphony of sound that filled the air. Inside the inn, the only sign of life was the lone figure of Jane, a young woman in her 20s, who had found herself stranded in this remote location due to the storm. Jane had been driving for hours, trying to make her way home, but the storm had grown so fierce that she had no choice but to seek shelter. The Oakwood Inn, with its antique charm and flickering neon sign, had been a beacon of hope in the darkness. She pushed open the heavy wooden door and entered the lobby, the bell above the door jingling softly. Behind the front desk stood Mr. Harold Reynolds, the night manager. He was a tall, lanky man with deep-set eyes and a perpetual air of melancholy about him. His hair was graying at the temples, and his face bore the wrinkles of a man who had seen more than his fair share of hardship. Mr. Reynolds was known around town as a recluse, a man who kept to himself and seldom ventured out during the day. "Good evening," Jane said, her voice trembling from the cold and exhaustion. "I was wondering if you had a room available for the night." Mr. Reynolds peered at her with a mixture of surprise and suspicion, as if he had not seen a guest in years. "Yes, we have a room," he replied, his voice low and raspy. "But you should know that this place is not like other hotels. It has a history, and some say it's haunted." Jane chuckled nervously. She had always been skeptical of ghost stories. "I'm not afraid of ghosts, Mr. Reynolds. I just need a warm bed for the night." Mr. Reynolds handed her an old brass key with a heavy iron keychain. "Room 237, he said, his eyes locked onto hers. "It's at the end of the hallway. The storm is expected to be fierce tonight, so be careful." With the key in hand, Jane made her way down the dimly lit corridor, the flickering candles casting eerie shadows on the ancient wallpaper. The floorboards creaked beneath her feet, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She reached room 237, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The room was a time capsule from a bygone era, with antique furniture, faded floral wallpaper, and a four-poster bed draped with heavy curtains. It was both charming and unsettling, and Jane couldn't help but shiver as she closed the door behind her. Hours passed, and Jane lay in bed, unable to sleep as the storm raged outside. The wind howled through the trees, and the rain beat against the windows like ghostly fingertips tapping on the glass. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was not alone in the room. Suddenly, a chilling presence washed over her, and she felt an icy hand on her shoulder. She turned, expecting to see Mr. Reynolds, but there was no one there. Her heart pounded in her chest as she scanned the room, her eyes wide with terror. Then, from the corner of her eye, she saw a shadowy figure standing by the window. It was Mr. Reynolds, but he looked different now, his face twisted in a malevolent grin. He raised a finger to his lips, signaling her to be silent, and then slowly faded away into the darkness. Terrified and unsure of what she had just witnessed, Emily grabbed her belongings and bolted from the room. She ran down the corridor, past the flickering candles, and burst into the lobby, where she found Mr. Reynolds still behind the front desk. You were just in my room," Jane stammered, her voice quivering. Mr. Reynolds looked at her with a blank expression. "I haven't left this desk all night, miss." Jane's mind raced, and she couldn't comprehend what had just happened. She thanked Mr. Reynolds and fled the Oakwood Inn, never looking back. As Jane drove away from the inn, the storm began to subside and the rain slowly stopped. She couldn't shake the feeling that the Oakwood Inn held dark secrets, secrets that Mr. Reynolds had known all along. It was a night she would never forget, a night when the past and the present had collided in a terrifying and inexplicable way, leaving her with a chilling tale to tell for the rest of her life.